The massive communication array on Zephyr Prime hummed with activity as another message from the Outer Rim systems arrived. Admiral Veltar stretched his long, elegant neck and looked at the holographic display with tired eyes. Another primitive species wanting to join the Galactic Confederation. He had seen dozens of these requests over his long career, and they were always the same. The message began to play, and Veltar watched a bipedal creature with pale skin and short fur only on its head appear before him. The creature called itself human and said it came from a planet called Earth. It spoke in a rough, harsh language that the translation systems struggled to process properly. "Greetings to the Galactic Confederation," the human said. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Command. We wish to apply for membership in your organization. We offer our friendship, our knowledge, and our protection to all peaceful species in the galaxy." Veltar almost laughed. Protection? From these creatures who had barely figured out how to leave their own star system? He had seen their technology specifications, and it was laughably primitive. But protocol demanded he review everything properly. The human continued speaking while technical data scrolled beside the image. "We submit the complete specifications of our prototype warship, the UES Prometheus, as evidence of our technological capabilities and peaceful intentions." Veltar called up the technical data and began reviewing it with his staff. The ship was enormous by human standards, nearly 2 kilometers long and built like a flying fortress. But compared to Confederation vessels, it was crude and bulky. "Look at this," said Science Officer Kethra, pointing at the weapon systems. "They use kinetic projectiles. Actual physical ammunition. How barbaric. And their power source," added Engineer Yoldum. "Nuclear fusion? We stopped using that technology 1,000 years ago. Our antimatter cores produce 10 times more energy in half the space." Veltar nodded as he examined the defensive systems. No energy shields either, just thick metal armor. Do they plan to simply absorb damage like some sort of battering ram? The staff meeting continued for an hour as they dissected every system on the human ship. The artificial intelligence was primitive, barely more advanced than a simple computer program. The life support systems were bulky and inefficient. Even their crew quarters were cramped and uncomfortable by civilized standards. "The worst part," said Tactical Officer Zenmar, "is their apparent obsession with redundancy. They have backup systems for their backup systems, 3 separate computer networks, multiple power sources, and enough spare parts to rebuild half the ship. It shows a complete lack of confidence in their own technology." Veltar dismissed his staff and sat alone to compose his response. He had dealt with many primitive species over the years, and the key was to be firm but not cruel. These humans seemed eager and hopeful, and crushing their dreams too harshly would be unnecessarily mean. The Admiral activated his communication system and began recording his message. His elegant form appeared on the holographic display, his silvery skin gleaming and his large, gentle eyes showing what he hoped was appropriate sympathy. "Greetings, Admiral Chen and the people of Earth," he began. "The Galactic Confederation has reviewed your application for membership, and we regret to inform you that you do not yet meet our technological or civilizational standards." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your species shows promise, but your technology is several centuries behind our minimum requirements. Your weapon systems are antiquated, your power generation is inefficient, and your defensive capabilities are inadequate for modern space warfare." Veltar gestured to data displays showing Confederation technology. "We suggest you continue developing your civilization. Focus on energy-based weapons, antimatter power sources, and advanced shielding technology. When you have achieved these milestones, you may reapply for membership." He ended the message with what he hoped was an encouraging tone. "The Confederation believes in the potential of all species to achieve greatness. We look forward to hearing from you again when you have made appropriate technological progress." The message was sent through the quantum communication network, traveling instantly across the galaxy to reach Earth. Veltar felt satisfied that he had handled the situation with appropriate diplomacy. The humans would need at least 500 years to develop proper technology, assuming they didn't destroy themselves first. Most primitive species did exactly that. Light years away, Admiral Sarah Chen received the message aboard the UES Prometheus as it hung in the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit. She watched Veltar's condescending response with a carefully neutral expression, though her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Antiquated weapons, she muttered. Inadequate defenses. Captain James Rodriguez, her second in command, stood beside her on the bridge. Orders, Admiral? Chen looked out at the stars through the armored viewport. The Prometheus was not alone in the outer system. Hidden in the shadow of asteroids and behind the gas giants, dozens of other ships waited. The real fleet. The fleet that the aliens had not been allowed to see. Send a message to Earth Command, Chen said quietly. Tell them the aliens have rejected our application. Tell them we are proceeding to Phase 2. Rodriguez nodded and moved to the communication station. Chen remained at the viewport thinking about the alien admiral's words. Antiquated weapons. He clearly didn't understand that sometimes old methods worked better than new ones. A railgun slug moving at a significant fraction of light speed didn't care about your energy shields. It would punch through them like they weren't even there. Inadequate defenses. The alien had looked at their armor plating and redundant systems and seen weakness. He didn't understand that when you came from a world where everything was constantly trying to kill you, you learned to build things that could take damage and keep working. Behind her, the crew of the Prometheus began receiving new orders. The ship's massive manufacturing bay, hidden deep in its armored hull, started producing things that were not in the specifications they had shared with the aliens. Weapons that broke several interstellar treaties, ammunition that had been banned by every civilized species in the galaxy. In the depths of space, other human ships began moving. Ships that had been built in secret, in asteroid mining facilities and hidden orbital yards, ships designed not by engineers who had never seen war, but by a species that had been fighting for survival since they first picked up rocks and used them as weapons. The Confederation had no idea what they had just done. They thought they had politely refused a membership application from a primitive species. What they had actually done was declare themselves an obstacle to human expansion into the galaxy. Admiral Chen opened a secure channel to Earth. President Harrison's face appeared on her private screen, looking tired but determined. How do they respond, Admiral? The President asked. Exactly as predicted, sir. They're arrogant and dismissive. They see us as no threat whatsoever. Good. That gives us the advantage of surprise. How long until you're ready to proceed? Chen looked at the tactical displays showing the positions of human ships throughout the solar system. 6 months to complete preparations, sir. The aliens won't know what hit them. The President nodded grimly. Make it so, Admiral. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you insult Deathworlders. The communication ended, and Chen returned to watching the stars. The aliens had made their choice. Now they would live with the consequences. 3 months after rejecting Earth's application, Admiral Veltar faced the worst crisis in Confederation history. The emergency session of the High Council was chaos, with representatives from dozens of species all talking at once. Fear filled the Great Chamber as reports continued to pour in from the outer systems. The entire Kepler defense grid has gone silent, announced Council Speaker Mordan, her voice shaking. 17 worlds, 4 billion citizens, all communication lost within the last week. Veltar studied the tactical displays with growing horror. The enemy moved like nothing they had ever seen before. Ship formations that had held the border for centuries were simply vanishing. No distress calls, no battle reports, just silence spreading across the galaxy like a plague. What are we dealing with? Asked Ambassador Trelvik from the Aquarian Federation. Our scouts report massive metallic structures, but they're unlike any ships in our databases. Science Counselor Yathara activated the holographic display, showing grainy footage from a long-range probe. The images made everyone in the chamber fall silent. Massive geometric shapes moved through space, their surfaces covered in what looked like thousands of smaller ships. As they watched, one of the structures approached a Confederation cruiser. Watch closely, Yathara said grimly. This was recorded 2 days ago at the Vegan outpost. The Confederation cruiser opened fire with its plasma batteries, beautiful blue streams of energy lancing out toward the enemy. The beams struck the geometric structure and simply disappeared, absorbed by its dark surface without any visible effect. In response, the enemy vessel extended what looked like mechanical tentacles. They reached out and touched the cruiser's hull. Within seconds, the cruiser's own weapons turned against it. Its plasma cannons swiveled and began firing at nearby friendly ships. Its missile systems launched their entire payload at the space station it was supposed to protect. The crew was still aboard, helpless as their own ship betrayed them. It's happening everywhere, Yathara continued. These entities, whatever they are, can take control of our technology, our artificial intelligence systems, our automated defenses, even our communication networks. Nothing is safe. General Caxthor of the Hegemony Warfleet stood up, his massive form towering over the other council members. Then we fight without AI. We use manual controls, basic weapons systems. We tried that, Veltar replied sadly. The enemy has weapons we don't understand. They fire projectiles that seem to ignore our energy shields completely. Our armor, designed to stop plasma and laser fire, is useless against whatever they're using. The debate continued for hours as the situation grew worse. More systems went dark. Refugee ships arrived with tales of horror. The enemy didn't just destroy Confederation forces, they converted them. Every captured ship became part of their fleet. Every automated system became their weapon. The aliens called them the Void Devourers because they seemed to consume everything they touched. Technology, ships, entire planetary defense networks, all absorbed into their collective mass. They were like a cancer spreading through the galaxy, growing stronger with every victory. We need help, Counselor Zafani said finally. Send out distress calls to every species in the galaxy. Offer them territory, technology, whatever they want. We cannot face this alone. Veltar nodded reluctantly. The proud Confederation, which had seen itself as the protector of civilized space, was now begging for assistance from the very species they had looked down upon. Emergency broadcasts went out to hundreds of worlds, reaching every corner of known space. The responses were disappointing. Most species were too primitive to offer real help. Others were too far away or too afraid to get involved. But one response was immediate and unexpected. Admiral, Communications Officer Lirith said, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. The council chamber fell silent. Veltar remembered the primitive humans he had dismissed just months earlier. What could they possibly offer in this crisis? The human Admiral Chen appeared on the main display, but something was different about her. Gone was the hopeful, almost pleading tone from their first communication. Now she looked calm, confident, and somehow dangerous. Admiral Veltar, she said without any formal greeting. I understand you're having some trouble with mechanical entities. We received your distress call. Admiral Chen, Veltar replied, trying to maintain his dignity. We would welcome any assistance your species can provide, though I should warn you these enemies are unlike anything we've encountered. Chen smiled, and it was not a reassuring expression. Oh, we know exactly what you're dealing with. We've been watching them for weeks. Quite impressive, really. They remind us of something from our own history. Your history? Veltar asked, confused. We had something similar on our world once. Machines that turned our own technology against us, that grew stronger by consuming our defenses. We called them Skynet and Borg and a dozen other names. Of course, those were just stories, but they taught us how to think about this kind of threat. Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. These humans had imagined such horrors before encountering them. What kind of species dreamed up scenarios of machines turning against their creators? You've dealt with this before? He asked hopefully. Not exactly this, but close enough. The key is understanding what you're really fighting. These aren't just machines, Admiral. They're a collective intelligence that relies on converting existing technology. They're strong against energy weapons because they can absorb and redirect energy. They can hack your AI because they're a much more advanced AI themselves. Chen leaned forward, her eyes hard. But they have weaknesses. Weaknesses that only a species like ours would understand. What do you want in return for your help? Veltar asked, though he dreaded the answer. Full membership in whatever government replaces the Confederation when this is over. Equal representation, equal rights, and equal access to all technology and territories. The council erupted in angry voices. Even facing extinction, many of the representatives couldn't stomach the idea of treating humans as equals, but Veltar raised his hand for silence. You're asking us to give you everything, he said. No, Chen replied calmly. We're asking you to let us save you. There's a difference. And if we refuse? Chen's smile grew colder. Then you'll face the Void Devourers alone, and when they've consumed your entire civilization, they'll turn toward human space, at which point we'll deal with them ourselves. The implication was clear. The humans would wait for the Confederation to fall, then face the strengthened enemy on their own terms. But why would they take that risk? You seem very confident, Veltar said carefully. Admiral, let me tell you something about humans. We come from what you would call a death world. Everything on our planet evolved to kill something else. Our food, our weather, our plants, even our bacteria are constantly trying to murder us. We didn't develop civilization despite this. We developed it because of it. Chen stood up, and Veltar could see the bridge of her ship behind her. It was cramped, utilitarian, and filled with humans who looked like they were ready for war. We've been preparing for threats like this our entire evolutionary history. While your species learned to build beautiful, efficient technology, we learned to build technology that keeps working when everything goes wrong. While you learned to trust your machines, we learned never to trust anything completely. The human admiral looked directly at Veltar. The Void Devourers are about to learn what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. The question is whether you want to be on our side when that happens. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Outside, the reports continued to arrive. More systems lost, more fleets converted, more worlds consumed. The enemy was getting closer to the core systems. Finally, Veltar spoke. All in favor of accepting the human terms? The vote was unanimous. Admiral Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the retreat of what remained of the Confederation's Third Fleet. Behind them, the Void Devourers continued their relentless advance toward the core systems. In just 2 weeks since accepting the human alliance, they had lost 6 more star systems and nearly half their remaining military force. Admiral, his communications officer called out, long-range sensors are detecting multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace. It's the human fleet. Veltar felt a mixture of hope and skepticism. He had agreed to let the humans help, but he still couldn't understand how these primitive beings could succeed where the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had failed. Their technology was centuries behind Confederation standards. How many ships? He asked. Sensors are having difficulty getting an accurate count, sir. The humans are using some kind of stealth technology we've never seen before. Best estimate is, wait, this can't be right. What is it? Sir, I'm reading over 300 contacts. But that's impossible. According to our intelligence, Earth only has a few dozen ships. Veltar moved to the sensor station and looked at the display himself. The readings were confusing, showing signatures that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Then, as he watched, the human fleet began to decloak. The main view screen lit up with an image that made Veltar's blood run cold. Ships, hundreds of them, stretching across space in perfect formation. But these weren't the crude vessel he had seen in the specifications months ago. These were monsters. The UES Prometheus hung in the center of the formation, but it had grown. What had been a 2-kilometer ship was now nearly 4 kilometers long and bristling with weapons. Massive turrets covered its hull and strange structures extended from its sides like mechanical wings. By the light, whispered his tactical officer. What are those things? The other human ships were equally intimidating. They came in different sizes and shapes, but all shared the same brutal functional design. Where Confederation ships were elegant curves and flowing lines, these were angular fortresses covered in armor and weapons. They looked like they had been built for war and nothing else. Open a channel to the human fleet, Veltar ordered. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen, and Veltar noticed she was now wearing what looked like military armor, instead of a simple uniform. Behind her, the bridge of the Prometheus had changed too. Banks of screens showed tactical data, and crew members wore helmets and battle gear. Admiral Chen, Veltar began, trying to keep his voice steady. Your fleet is larger than we expected. Chen smiled that cold smile again. Did you think we sent you everything we had in those initial specifications? Admiral, what you saw was a single prototype ship with basic weapons and standard armor. We wanted to see how you would react to a simple diplomatic overture. This is your real fleet? Part of it. We have more ships in reserve, but this should be enough for the current situation. Veltar stared at the display showing the human fleet. Each ship looked like it could take on a dozen Confederation vessels single-handed. Admiral, I have to ask, what exactly are you? We're humans, Chen replied simply. We come from Earth, the third planet in the Sol system. It's what your science teams would classify as a Class 12 death world. The bridge fell silent. A Class 12 death world was the highest danger rating in the Confederation database. Such planets were considered unsurvivable by any intelligent species. The fact that humans had not only survived but thrived on such a world was impossible. That's impossible, Veltar said. No intelligent species could evolve on a world that dangerous. And yet here we are, Chen said. Would you like to know what a Class 12 death world teaches you, Admiral? It teaches you that everything is trying to kill you, so you better be ready to kill it first. It teaches you that there's no such thing as a fair fight. Only fights you win and fights you lose. It teaches you that the universe doesn't care about your survival, so you better care about it yourself. She gestured to something off-screen, and the camera pulled back to show more of the Prometheus bridge. Veltar could see crew members checking weapons and preparing for battle. They moved with the fluid efficiency of born predators. Your Confederation developed in a galaxy where the strongest species were what we would call herbivores. Peaceful, civilized, advanced. You built beautiful technology because you had the luxury of safety. You created AI to handle the dangerous work because you didn't want to risk yourselves. Chen's expression hardened. We don't have that luxury. Every human ship is built to take damage and keep fighting. Every human crew is trained to make life or death decisions in seconds. Every human weapon is designed to kill things that are bigger, stronger, and more advanced than we are. But your technology, Veltar protested. It's so primitive compared to ours, is it? Chen asked. Your plasma weapons are very impressive against energy shields. But what happens when something doesn't use energy shields? Your antimatter reactors produce tremendous power. But what happens when the enemy hacks your control systems and turns them into bombs? Your AI can process information faster than any biological brain. But what happens when a smarter AI takes control of it? The human admiral leaned forward. We use primitive kinetic weapons because a chunk of metal moving at relativistic speed doesn't care about your fancy shields. We use nuclear reactors because they're stable and unhackable. We use human crews because humans can do something your AI can't. What's that? We can be unpredictable. We can be irrational. We can make decisions that don't make logical sense but somehow work anyway. And most importantly, we can hate. Veltar felt another chill run down his spine.
Hate? Admiral, your species learned to solve problems through cooperation and logic.
We learned to solve problems by finding the thing that was threatening us and killing it until it stopped being a threat. The Void Devourers are very good at turning logic against itself, but they've never encountered pure focused hatred backed by the weapons of a death world. Chen turned to someone off-screen and nodded.
Admiral Veltar, I suggest you move your fleet to a safe distance.
We're about to show the Void Devourers what happens when they threaten human space. What's your plan? Something your species would never consider, Chen replied. We're going to board their ships and rip out their computer cores by hand. We're going to use weapons that violate every civilized treaty in the galaxy. We're going to fight them like the wild animals we are. The transmission ended, and Veltar watched as the human fleet began to move. They didn't advance in the neat formations favored by Confederation tacticians. Instead, they spread out like a pack of hunters surrounding prey. Admiral, his sensor officer called out. The Void Devourers have detected the human fleet. They're moving to intercept. Show me. The view screen shifted to show the enemy force. Massive geometric structures drifted through space, their surfaces crawling with smaller vessels like insects on a corpse. They had grown since consuming the Confederation fleets, now numbering in the thousands. As Veltar watched, the Void Devourers began their standard attack pattern. They launched swarms of smaller craft while extending their hacking tendrils toward the human ships. It was the same tactic that had destroyed every Confederation force they'd encountered, but something was different this time. The human ships didn't slow down or try to avoid the attack. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the enemy, weapons charging. By the light, Veltar whispered. They're not even trying to evade. His tactical officer looked up from his station with wide eyes. Sir, I don't think they know how to retreat. The first human ship reached weapon range and opened fire. Instead of the elegant plasma beams Veltar was used to, Massive slugs of metal streaked through space at incredible speed. When they struck the Void Devourer ships, the impacts were devastating. Armor that had shrugged off Confederation weapons cracked and shattered. More human ships joined the attack, and Veltar realized he was watching something unprecedented. These weren't the tactics of a civilized species. This was the fury of apex predators unleashed on prey that had made the mistake of threatening their territory. The real battle was about to begin. The Battle of Kepler 442 began with a sound that Admiral Veltar had never heard before in space combat. Through the communication channels, he could hear human voices singing. Not the elegant harmonies of civilized species, but something primal and violent. War songs from humanity's bloody past, mixed with modern military chants that spoke of death and victory. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," came the human commander's voice over the tactical frequency. "Remember, these machines took our worlds. They killed our people. Today we show them what it means to threaten a Deathworld species. No mercy, no prisoners. Send them to hell." The response from hundreds of human ships was a roar of approval that made Veltar's crew step back from their stations in fear. These weren't the disciplined acknowledgments of professional soldiers. This was the hunting cry of predators who had found their prey. The Void Devourers responded to the human advance with their standard tactics. Hacking tendrils reached out toward the human fleet, seeking to take control of their systems. But something was wrong. The tendrils made contact with human ships and then recoiled as if burned. "What's happening?" Veltar asked his science officer. "The humans appear to have isolated their computer systems," came the confused reply. "They're using manual controls for everything. But that should make their ships nearly impossible to operate effectively." On the view screen, Veltar watched human vessels performing maneuvers that should have been beyond manual control. Ships twisted and rolled through space with deadly precision, their crews somehow managing to coordinate complex attacks without AI assistance. The first human railgun slug struck their targets with devastating effect. The kinetic projectiles, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, punched through Void Devourer armor like it was paper. Where Confederation plasma beams had been absorbed harmlessly, these primitive metal slugs shattered entire sections of enemy ships. But the humans weren't finished. As Veltar watched in horror and fascination, human ships began firing weapons he had never seen before. Massive missiles streaked through space, each one the size of a small fighter craft. When they struck Void Devourer vessels, they didn't just explode. They seemed to tear holes in reality itself. "What are those weapons?" he demanded. His tactical officer's voice was shaking. "Sir, I'm reading exotic matter signatures. I think they're using antimatter warheads." "That's impossible. Antimatter weapons are banned by every civilized treaty in the galaxy." "The humans never signed those treaties, sir." The battle intensified as more human ships joined the attack. The Void Devourers, for the first time since their campaign began, seemed confused. Their adaptive defenses, designed to counter energy weapons, were useless against kinetic projectiles. Their hacking abilities were meaningless against crews who trusted flesh over silicon. Then something happened that made Veltar question everything he thought he knew about warfare. A human destroyer, its hull breached and atmosphere venting, didn't retreat or call for help. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the largest Void Devourer ship. "What are they doing?" Veltar whispered. The destroyer's captain came on the communication channel, his voice calm despite the fact that his ship was dying around him. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the UES Venganza. Hull breach in sections 4 through 7. Life support failing. Recommend immediate ram attack on primary target." "Negative, Rodriguez," came Admiral Chen's voice. "You have wounded aboard." "Ma'am, we've already transferred wounded to escape pods. Skeleton crew remaining. We can do some real damage here." There was a pause, then Chen's voice again, hard as steel. "Understood, Captain." "Make it count." Veltar watched in disbelief as the human destroyer continued its suicidal charge. The Void Devourer ship fired everything it had, tearing chunks out of the destroyer's hull. But the human ship kept coming, its crew somehow keeping it operational despite catastrophic damage. When the destroyer struck, the explosion was visible from across the battlefield. The massive Void Devourer ship, which had seemed invincible just moments before, broke apart in a chain reaction of secondary explosions. "They're insane," Veltar's tactical officer said quietly. "No," Veltar replied, beginning to understand. "They're predators, and predators don't give up." The battle continued for hours, but the outcome was becoming clear. The Void Devourers, despite their technological superiority, were being systematically destroyed. Every tactic they tried was countered by human crews who seemed to thrive on chaos and uncertainty. When the Void Devourers tried to swarm human ships with smaller craft, human point defense systems tore them apart. When they tried to concentrate their fire on individual targets, human ships worked together like pack hunters, surrounding and destroying isolated enemies. But the most terrifying part came when human boarding parties began their assault. Veltar watched through long-range cameras as human soldiers in powered armor cut their way into Void Devourer ships. They moved through the mechanical corridors like devils, destroying everything in their path with weapons that seemed designed for close combat. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "I'm picking up transmissions from inside the Void Devourer ships. The humans they're talking to each other. Put it on speaker." The bridge filled with the voices of human soldiers fighting inside enemy vessels. What Veltar heard made his blood run cold. "Contact left. Mechanical spider things moving in fast. I see them. Grenades out!" The sound of explosions echoed through the communication system. "Nice work, Martinez. Keep moving. We need to reach the central core." "Copy that, Sergeant. These things bleed just like everything else. Remember, people, we're not here to capture anything. We're here to break things and kill machines. Let's show these tin cans what humans do to things that threaten our families." Veltar realized he was listening to soldiers who were fighting hand-to-hand combat inside enemy spacecraft. It was a concept so alien to civilized warfare that his mind struggled to process it. Who sent living beings to fight machines in the vacuum of space? "Movement ahead," came another voice. "Big one this time." "I've got it. Cover me while I plant the charges." "Sir, that thing is 3 times your size. Then it'll make a bigger explosion when I blow it up." "For Earth!" The communication dissolved into the sounds of battle, punctuated by human war cries and the screech of tearing metal. Minutes later, another Void Devourer ship went dark as its core systems were destroyed from within. As the battle reached its climax, Admiral Chen's voice came over the fleet frequency again. "All ships, priority target is the command vessel. I want that thing dead in the next 10 minutes. The human fleet concentrated its fire on the largest Void Devourer ship, a massive construct that had been directing the enemy forces. Under the combined assault of hundreds of railgun slugs and antimatter warheads, its defenses began to crack. Then something unexpected happened. The command ship began to retreat. "They're running," Veltar's tactical officer shouted. "The Void Devourers are actually retreating." But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. "All ships pursue and destroy. We don't let any of them escape to threaten other worlds." What followed was not a battle but a hunt. Human ships chased down fleeing Void Devourer vessels with relentless determination. They showed no mercy to enemies who begged for quarter, no hesitation in destroying ships that tried to surrender. "Admiral Chen," Veltar tried to contact the human commander. "The enemy is defeated. Surely you can allow the survivors to retreat?" Chen's response was immediate and cold. "Admiral, these machines consumed entire worlds. They turned our own technology against us. They showed no mercy to billions of innocent beings. They will receive none from us." The last Void Devourer ship died 6 hours later, its hull cracked open by human weapons, and its crew spaces flooded with the vacuum of space. The threat that had terrorized the galaxy for months was over. But as Veltar looked at the aftermath of the battle, he realized something that chilled him to his core. The humans hadn't just defeated the Void Devourers. They had enjoyed it. They had hunted them down like wild animals and destroyed them with savage efficiency. What exactly had the Confederation allied itself with? 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, Admiral Veltar stood in what had once been the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Confederation. The elegant spires and flowing architecture remained unchanged, but everything else was different. The chamber now buzzed with the harsh sounds of human voices conducting business in their efficient, direct manner. The Void Devourers were extinct, not defeated, not driven back, but completely eliminated from the galaxy. Human fleets had hunted down every last remnant of their civilization and destroyed them utterly. The mechanical intelligence that had seemed unstoppable just months before was now nothing but debris floating in dead systems. But the cost of victory had been higher than anyone expected, not in lives or ships, but in the complete restructuring of galactic civilization. The Galactic Confederation no longer existed. In its place stood the Terran hegemony, with humanity firmly at its head. "Admiral Veltar," came a familiar voice. He turned to see Admiral Chen approaching, now wearing the insignia of Supreme Naval Commander of the hegemony. She had aged in the month since the battle, but there was a confidence in her bearing that spoke of absolute authority. "Admiral Chen," he replied, offering the respectful bow that protocol now demanded when addressing human leadership. "Congratulations on your promotion. Thank you. I wanted to speak with you about the integration of your people into the new order." Veltar nodded carefully. The integration had been swift and thorough. Species that had accepted human authority quickly found themselves as junior partners in the new government. Those that had resisted faced the full might of human military forces and learned very quickly that defiance was not an option. "The Zephyrian people are adapting well," he said. It was true, though the adaptation had been painful for many of his kind. They had gone from being one of the galaxy's dominant species to being administrators in humanity's expanding empire. "I'm glad to hear that," Chen said, though Veltar suspected she would have been equally calm if he had reported problems. Humans, he had learned, were remarkably practical about resistance. They simply removed it. "May I ask you something, Admiral?" Veltar said carefully. "Of course. When you first contacted us about membership in the Confederation, was any of it real? Did you actually want to join as equals?" Chen smiled, and Veltar was relieved to see it was one of her genuine expressions, rather than the cold, predatory look she wore in battle. "We would have been happy to join as equals, Admiral. We sent you honest specifications for a real ship, offered genuine friendship, and asked for nothing more than membership in your organization. But you were prepared for rejection. We're always prepared for things to go wrong. It's how we've survived this long." Veltar looked around the chamber where human technicians were installing new computer systems. The hegemony had banned AI throughout its territory, relying instead on human operators for all critical functions. It was less efficient than the old Confederation systems. But as the war had proven, efficiency meant nothing if your enemies could turn your own technology against you. "The galaxy has changed dramatically," Veltar observed. "Yes, it has. For the better, I think. For humans, certainly." Chen stopped walking and looked at him directly. "Admiral, let me tell you something about the old Confederation. In the past year, we've captured extensive Void Devourer databases. Do you know how long they had been operating in this galaxy before they attacked your territory?" Veltar shook his head. "Over 2 centuries. They consumed dozens of primitive species while the Confederation ignored the outer systems. Your government knew they existed and decided they weren't worth the trouble of dealing with." The revelation hit Veltar like a physical blow. "That's impossible. We would have received distress calls." "You did. Hundreds of them. Your records show they were classified as primitive species conflicts and filed away. The Confederation decided it wasn't worth risking advanced ships to save lesser civilizations." Chen continued walking, her voice calm but implacable. "When the Void Devourers finally grew strong enough to threaten Confederation core systems, you panicked. You contacted every species in the galaxy begging for help, including the primitives you had previously ignored. But you came," Veltar said quietly. "Yes, we came. Not because we owed you anything, but because those machines would have eventually threatened human space. We protected ourselves by protecting you." They reached the Central Command Center, where human officers coordinated the activities of dozens of species. The efficiency was remarkable, but Veltar noticed something troubling. Every critical position was held by a human. The other species, no matter how advanced their technology or extensive their knowledge, served in advisory roles only. "You don't trust us," he said. "We don't trust anyone completely," Chen replied. "It's nothing personal. We've learned that trust has to be earned through actions, not words. And what actions would earn human trust?" Chen considered the question carefully. "Prove that you're willing to fight for something bigger than your own survival. The Confederation species were very good at protecting themselves, but they never learned to protect others. That's why you lost to the Void Devourers." "And humans are different?" "We protect our own, Admiral. all of our own. When humanity claims a species as allies, we will fight to the death to defend them, but in return, we expect the same loyalty. Veltar understood the implication. The hegemony wasn't just a political alliance, it was a pack structure with humans as the alpha species. Other races could prosper under human protection, but they would never again be independent. What about species that refused to join? He asked. Chen's expression didn't change, but Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. There are no species that refuse to join, Admiral. There are species that are members of the hegemony, and there are species that no longer exist. You would commit genocide? We would eliminate threats to human civilization and our allies. We've learned that half measures only lead to bigger problems later. The conversation was interrupted by a young human officer who approached with obvious urgency. Admiral Chen, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim. 3 species have declared independence from the hegemony and are forming their own alliance. Chen sighed. How long do they think they'll last without our protection? Intelligence. Estimate 6 months before they start fighting among themselves, ma'am. The Vorthan Empire is already mobilizing against the Crystalline Collective. Send Admiral Park with the 5th Fleet. Standard procedures. Yes, ma'am. Overwhelming force and immediate surrender demands? Correct. If they surrender, they rejoin the hegemony with full rights and protections. If they resist. Chen shrugged. We make an example that will discourage future rebellions. The officer saluted and left to carry out his orders. Veltar watched the exchange with growing understanding of how the new galaxy worked. Human rule was absolute, but it was also protective. Species that accepted their place in the hierarchy were genuinely cared for and defended. Those that challenged human authority were removed as threats. You're building an empire, Veltar said. We're building a pack, Chen corrected. Empires fall when the emperor dies or the economy collapses. Packs survive because every member knows their role and trusts the others to fulfill theirs. And humanity's role is to be the pack leaders. Humanity's role is to be the guardians. We're the species that faces the threats others can't handle, that makes the hard decisions others won't make, that fights the wars others can't win. Chen led him to a massive view screen showing the galaxy in real time. Green markers indicated hegemony systems, while red markers showed potential threats. Veltar was amazed to see how quickly human influence had spread. Look at this, Admiral, Chen said, pointing to the display. Crime is down 90% in hegemony space. Interspecies conflicts have virtually disappeared. Trade has increased by over 300%. Technological development is accelerating as species share knowledge freely. It was true. The galaxy under human rule was more peaceful and prosperous than it had ever been under the Confederation. But it was also more controlled, more regimented, more militaristic. The price of peace is freedom, Veltar observed. The price of freedom is often death, Chen replied. We've chosen life. As they stood watching the display, reports continued to come in from across the galaxy. Human fleets patrolling trade routes, human administrators managing planetary governments, human soldiers training the militaries of allied species. The Terran hegemony was growing stronger every day. What happens next? Veltar asked. Chen smiled, and this time it was the predatory expression he remembered from the war. Next, we prepare for the real threats. The Void Devourers were just the beginning, Admiral. Our scouts have detected signals from beyond the Galactic Rim. There are things out there in the dark between galaxies, things that make the Devourers look like children's toys. And you're not afraid? We're terrified, Chen admitted. But we're also ready. The galaxy is united under human leadership, defended by human weapons and protected by human determination. When the next threat comes, we'll be waiting. Veltar looked at the human admiral and realized he was seeing the future of galactic civilization, not the elegant, peaceful democracy the Confederation had tried to build, but something harder and more enduring.